You all to historic Jamestown. Just as a preface to my presentation, when you came across the causeway and came onto the island, we're presently on National Park Service property. When we go through the gates here, you're going to be on private property, right? 22 acres of the island belongs to the organization that I work for, and it's called Preservation Virginia. And why I mention that is sometimes when people come out to the site, they'll ask us, hey, is this where my tax dollars are going? All right. We don't receive any federal funding. We don't receive any state funding. Okay. All the money that supports the archaeology here comes exclusively from grants and donations. Okay. I just wanted to mention that right off the top. The tour will be about 45 minutes long. I'll give you a little bit of a historical perspective right off the top, and then we'll actually go into the site and see some of the locations where we've been doing archaeology. What I would ask, please, is if you would keep your questions till the end of the tour. I'll be more than happy to stick around afterwards and answer people's questions, but I know some of you got reservations for lunch or whatever, so I don't want to take up your time. And I would ask is also if you would think about two questions during the course of the tour. All right? Why do we study history, and why is history important? All right? Think about those two questions during the tour. And I'd like to start off by asking another question, and that is, can anybody tell me why in 1607 these 104 men and boys arrived here at Jamestown? What was their reason for coming here? Yes, ma'am. Okay, the Virginia Company and making money.
Taxes?
Sir?
Taxes?
Taxes? More specific?
Gold and iron.
Okay, gold, all right. Okay, religious persecution. Yeah, some people say they were looking for the Northwest Passage. Some people would say they wanted to bring Christianity to Native Americans. All good reasons. But the real reason, and the lady hit on it right off the top, was they came here to make money, all right? The Virginia Company, which was the organization that put this whole thing together, was not unlike a corporation today, all right? Where a corporation, they sell shares of stock in return for the shareholders' investment. We all know that shareholders want a return on an investment, correct? Now, prior to 1607, can anybody tell me what was going on in Central and South America, specifically with the Spanish? Okay. What's that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, 1492.
Yeah.
What's that? Okay, conquering the native peoples. Exactly. They were essentially pillaging Central and South America of all their gold and silver, putting it on their ships and bringing it back to Old Spain. All right? The English saw what was going on. They wanted a piece of that action. If you're familiar with Sir Francis Drake and the Sea Dogs, all right, the English crown was covertly supporting their raids on these galleons. Finally, it had gotten to the point that the Spanish king had had enough of this, and can anybody tell me what happens in 1588? I had such high aspirations. The Spanish Armada, okay? The Spanish king assembles this huge navy with the express purpose of going to England and destroying the English fleet, all right? We all know what happens to their Armada. It was not only naval engagement, but they had problems with weather, they had problems with their equipment, but essentially the Armada is destroyed. This now paves the way for the English to come to the North American continent and colonize relatively unimpeded. Now, the Virginia Company wasn't so short-sighted in that they put these 104 men and boys on these 3 ships. They go sailing over there. They go looking for gold and silver. They don't find any, so they get back on their ships and go home. No, they had a backup plan, all right? If they weren't able to find gold or silver, they were going to try to manufacture things here to bring back to England and to sell, all right? So they brought artisans with them. They brought jewelers, they brought blacksmiths, glass makers, masons, carpenters, all with the express purpose that if they couldn't find gold or silver, they were going to manufacture products here to sell back in England. They didn't bring any backwoodsmen. They didn't bring any farmers with them. The plan was they were going to trade with the locals for their foodstuffs. All right? So they brought trade goods with them. They brought glass beads. They brought knives. They brought hatchets, things like that. The only problem with this plan was when the English arrive here, it's during the midst of one of the worst droughts in 700 years. All right? Native Americans, they had a corn crop that year, but they didn't have enough to trade with. So what ended up happening, instead of having a reciprocal arrangement with the Native Americans, it winds up being adversarial. And eventually the English have to take by force food from the Native Americans. Now, this doesn't put them on the best footing with the locals right off the bat, all right? Now, why here? Why on Jamestown Island? Can anybody tell me why they would have located their settlement here?
Close to water to the ships that might come in. There's a port on the other side.
Okay, they could bring their ships right up here to the shoreline, drop the gangplank down and walk off, all right? You know, something else, something more specific. What? Yes, ma'am. Okay, very, very important. But what are we on?
An island.
We're on an island, Jamestown Island, all right? An island is much more easily defensible than if they would have located their settlement on the mainland, all right? That's one point. Second point, specifically regarding the Spanish. Okay.
Further north than the Spanish?
Well, yes and no. Remember, all right, even though the Spanish Armada had been destroyed, the Spanish were still running those galleons, all right, between the Caribbean and Old Spain, bringing all that gold and silver back, all right? And back then, navigators, they kind of like to stay within sight of land before they make that right-hand turn and head to Europe. So if the English would have located their settlement on the coast, or even in the Chesapeake Bay, there would have been a good likelihood they would have been spotted by the Spanish and attacked. So the Virginia Company was very specific in saying you would locate your settlement far enough inland that you wouldn't have any interference from the Spanish. Okay? That's a little bit about history, just a little bit about the archaeology for a second, all right? Prior to 1994, when my former boss, Dr. Bill Kelso, started excavations on the island, there had been archaeology done, all right? No one was ever able to find the fort, and the general consensus was that the fort had been washed away by the river. It no longer existed. Bill comes here and he says, nope, the fort's still here. They've just been looking for it in the wrong place. And what Bill does is he focuses attention on the church tower, all right? If you look over here behind you, this church structure, this was built in the early 1900s. But behind it is the church tower. The tower is the oldest standing structure here on the island. Bill's thinking was that they wouldn't have located the church very far from where they would have conducted their church services, all right? Naturally, when the English arrived here, one of the first things they would have done was conduct church services in order to thank God for their safe passage to the New World. So they would have considered that sacred ground, and they wouldn't have built the church very far from there. So Bill focuses attention on the tower, all right? And he comes out here and he starts digging in between what we call the eastern bulwark of the fort and the tower, all right? Now you got to picture this. This is an older guy, comes out here by himself. He's got his wheelbarrow, his shovel, sets up his little rope perimeter. There's a story, all right? This woman comes up to the rope. She's got her two little boys with her. One of the little boys asks her, hey, sir, what are you doing? All right? And Bill goes, well, I'm looking for James Fort. The mother grabs the two kids. She pulls them away. She thinks Bill's crazy, right? Everybody knows this fort doesn't exist. Well, when Bill starts digging, he starts finding artifacts. He starts finding artifacts from the 17th century. Come to find out later, what he was digging into was a trash pit, all right? But these artifacts, they stimulate interest in the project. He's able to put a team together, put some money together, and the rest, shall we say, is history. Okay? All right. We're going to now take a walk inside the gate, sir. We're going to stop there momentarily. I'll give you some information over there. Yes, ma'am.
What year did you say that was? 94. Thank you.
Keep your tour questions to the end of the tour, all right? All right, look, follow me inside the gate, please.
Okay, this will be part one of probably 4 parts of this tour. I'm doing it in 360 so you can look around on your device. And anyhow, part 2 will be next, which is the start of the tour.